Hey now, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track, America's leading Formula One podcast. Today was the Mexican GP. It was better than expected. We'll,
Yeah,
we'll take that apart and more. I'm Brian, that's Rob. Welcome, everybody.
yeah. Do you know what? Maybe we set the bar too low because of how bad last year's was, but I was pleasantly surprised today. Was it the best race I've ever seen in my life? No. But was it better than last year's Siesta Fiesta? Yes.
Yes,
So I'm sure we'll get into that, right?
100%.
Um,
I do think we set the bar so darn low. We, we could have just stepped over it and been fine. But yeah, it was
true,
it was all right. It was all right.
true. But maybe that when the bar is that low, it just the silver lining is easy to attain. So yeah, so we will get into our Mexican GP review real soon. First, we're going to hit news and social, race review, and then Pitlane Paul and Brazilian preview. And that's and
Yes.
that's not some dodgy preview of what Brian might be doing to his downstairs region. We're on about the race at Interlagos next week, so
Which
the
should be a
last of a
great
triple
race.
header.
Yes.
Which some like to say it's a triple header. What it really is F1 giving us a triple header ahead of our 100th episode. That's what it really is. It's like leading us in to what is going to be an absolutely epic episode. But anyway, let's get on to news and social.
Let's do it.
Before we get into the real news, I've got to hit kind of little news, selfish news. I'm going to call it first. So I was on a work trip to New York City this last week,
New York
and
City.
I may have been in an Irish bar on Monday
Oh,
night,
I love this
and I
story.
may have partaken in one or two beers. One of them may have been a Guinness, one of them may not have been. But anyway,
Paul would want me to
um,
ask, did you finish any of them?
I finished every drink, including the one that somebody bought for me. And that somebody, now, this could have been the biggest elaborate hoax of ever, and I could have fallen for sleight of hand. And you know what? I don't care if it's not, because it was brilliant. I'm sitting there wearing my Dirty Side of the Track T-shirt that we printed for Canadian race. So Dirty Side logo on the front, all the tracks on the back. And I get talking to a family, and this one guy is like, "Pretty sure my dad listens to your podcast." I'm like, "Not a chance." Like, there's like about there's like
Yeah, we don't
200.
need numbers.
There's a few listens a week, and most of those are pretty much me and Brian and our families. Like, there's no chance.
No.
So he's texting, and this is where maybe I was a little drunk, so maybe I didn't see the text properly. I don't know, but suddenly he pops the phone up to me, and he's got iTunes on, and he's got our show. He's got Dirty Side of the Track there. He's like, "Yeah, this is what he listens to." I'm like, "Wow." He's like, "But he doesn't believe me that I've met you, so can I have a selfie with you with a t-shirt on?" I'm like, "Yeah." So yeah, it was very, very surreal, but there we go, Brian. I think we've kind of have we made it?
Yes, we
No.
should actually fold up
Yes,
the pod
yes.
now. So if you're listening,
So if you're
random
listening,
person in
fa-
Ireland,
yeah, random father of somebody that texted you and then sent you a selfie of me, we'd love you to reach out and tell us if this story is true. If we don't hear anything, then he was probably just yanking my chain, to which I still don't care because I felt like 10 feet tall, so it was amazing. Um,
like the time someone came up to me at the car show a year and a half ago,
yes.
we were like 2 episodes in and they knew us. I'm like, I don't think you do.
However, on a little bit of a downside, this last week we got an invitation from Buzzsprout, which is the platform that hosts our podcast, and they said that we've had enough downloads now on a rolling monthly basis that we can monetize. It was like, oh, okay, we can put adverts, commercials, whatever you want to call them,
Yeah.
onto our pod. So we kind of went to our Discord channel, and if you're not on that, you really should be. The link's in our show notes. We said, like, if we put a commercial in the middle, are you gonna like leave us? Because like we haven't got many of you. So if we're gonna turn you against us by having to listen to a 30-second commercial, we don't want to do it. And everyone said, no, you deserve this. Monetize, go for it. So I went ahead. There was this cycling podcast that was an advert that was up for grabs. So I subscribed to it. I was like, yes, we're gonna make some money. What I didn't realize, and I haven't actually told you this, Brian, is that what that must be is that people pay to appear on other people's podcasts, right? And when their budget has run out, the commercial comes to an end. So we subscribed, we were monetized for a number of episodes, and then that was fulfilled. We had an email this week, Brian, that we have earned this week based on commercials that played on our pokey little podcast 6 cents. Now, don't spend it all at once, but the commercials run to an end now. That was it. That was our monetization run done.
A nickel and a penny? You're telling me we got 2 coins.
Yeah. So let's
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 get into
move
the
on.
news.
Let's move on and get to real news, right? So last week we had the disqualification at the USGP, and the fallout rumbled on a little bit. And there was a belief that there was a limited number of cars that were checked for planks, and there could have been a whole heap more that got away with it.
Right.
Um, Now, what they did was they picked one car each from the top four teams. Therefore, Lewis and Charles got disqualified. Russell and Sainz could probably easily have got disqualified, given they had the exact same cars with the exact same setups. There was this kind of swirl that, oh yeah, it's awful. They should check everybody. It's like, no, the FIA just, well, the FIA claimed it's a random sampling of cars. It's random to the teams. It's not random to the FIA. The FIA have got a set of protocols. They decide which ones they're going to do. They just don't publish it, so the teams don't know who's going to get checked. So depending on which side of the coin you sit on, it's either random or it's not. But they don't check everybody. Everybody gets away with it every now and again. And the fact Mercedes took it on the chin and kind of went, yeah, we only had one practice set up. We thought it looked okay after FP1, so we just kind of went with it. The fact they didn't kick up a stink, they knew they got done.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a pretty black and white rule. I mean, you're either inside the letter of the law or you've run afoul, and they ran afoul. What's interesting to me is all of the weak spiraling since of why they picked these four and what did this mean. Bryson Sullivan, we've quoted him before, reported from Autosport that the reality is that the plank checks are not fully random, but instead influenced by FIA observations of onboard video, accelerometer data of the bouncing, and even the smell of a worn plank after the race. Gotta love Formula One. Something smells funny. We should check those cars. And we did talk about this last week with the DQs. Logan, the Sargent, moved up to P10 for his first point, the 2023 U.S. Grand Prix, the last time an American scored a point. It was 30 years ago. It was Michael Andretti. He was P3. He got 4 points, which obviously there were different scales back then, in the 93 Italian Grand Prix. So Andretti will come back up later in this episode, but 30 friggin' years.
This annoyed me a little bit as well, where a lot of people went, "Oh yeah, but he only scored points because of a disqualification." It's like, okay, but so if the DQ is given after the race is finished, for some reason you're less worthy of your point.
They should
But if the
vacate
guy,
those spots. Just
but the
no
guy,
points
if the
for
guy in
anyone in
front
those
of
spots.
if the guy in front of you during a race gets given a 5-second penalty and therefore you finish ahead
Right.
of him, that's fine.
Carlos
You-
dropped from like fifth to last in Australia because of a 5-second penalty. No one
Yeah,
said,
it's-
you know what, I don't want the points. Just leave it as it was. It's fine.
yeah, just do it. It's fine. But yeah, it's like it just never ceases to amaze me how far some people would take like the anti-American sentiment. It's like, one American scored a point. Yeah, but he didn't do it properly. Yes, he
Yeah.
did. He raced. He completed the race.
Yeah, he had a
He
good
finished
race.
where he finished, and then because of other people ahead of him getting disqualified, he got elevated. Just please leave it and move on. Talking of moving on, Formula One Academy winner Marta Garcia.
Marta.
She's been handed a fully paid drive for 2024 in the Formula Renault Euro Cup by Alpine Series, which is great because we talked last week about how
Yes.
she can't return to the academy, which is probably the worst timing ever because she was the inaugural champion in a year where no one got to see it, and she can't return for the TV cameras next year. So this is great. Fully paid drive, fully deserved.
I'm excited. I'm really excited, and I can't
Yeah.
wait to see what Marta can do with the opportunity. And I agree with you. It is one of those things where the first year of a series you win and you can't come back. Well, where else do you go? Because we haven't built the next thing. You know, it's like, thanks, that was fun, and I'm out here with my lunchbox looking for what's next. But that is actually fantastic. And Rob, why don't you start this next one because you found this, and I'll let you kind of jump in here.
I did, and it got a little bit too techie for me as it went into it. I might come out in a rash, but so I'm stealing this from Autosport.com. 2026 engines, as they all start working on it, the FIA has amended the rules to basically try to close off any back doors of anybody getting any advantage through the use of fuel partners. So apparently, as they're putting all their engines together, they must be working with fuel partners to kind of get performance results on it. And I guess there must have been some back door where they could have gone, so are you testing any other engines at the moment? How's the fuel working on those other engines that you're looking at? And what they've basically done, they clamped down. They said you're not allowed to do full testing on the full V6, and you're not allowed to. The regulation also rules out the possibility of any manufacturer gaining an advanced knowledge of engine design from bench testing from any other fuel supplier. So they can't kind of horse trade notes from like, we'll go with that fuel supplier. Oh, but that one we know is working with Mercedes, so we'll do a test with them and get benchmarking, because benchmarking essentially tells you what they've been able to attain
Hmm.
through your competition. So they've been slamming all this down. They've gone even further now and said they're trying to limit like any kind of IP knowledge. That if anybody leaves like a fuel supplier and goes and works somewhere else, they're not allowed to like divulge any information anywhere they go. It feels a little bit tinfoil hatty. I don't know if you read this through, Brian, or if you just glazed over once you saw how many notes I dropped into the
Well,
thing
there
on
were
this.
certain
But
things that made me fall asleep, but I did read it, and I mean, it is. It's like they wrote whomever wrote this basically said, in a utopian environment, this is how it would work. You wouldn't share any information. There would be walls between the whole world. And I have people I work with who act this way and think everything should be sort of perfect and black and white and everything fits in a box. That's not the way the world works. People are imperfect beings. And so someone will walk out of a job at a fuel supplier and they will have IP in the brain and they will use that somewhere else. It may not be on a hard drive, a flash drive, a computer, or a file, a .xls, but it's in their memory. And so I get their point. But yeah, I mean, it's a nice effort, but good luck figuring out how to enforce that. One thing that did come up last week, which we've covered this a bit. I'm kind of running out of steam on this whole Andretti train situation. I've been on board the Andretti train, and it feels like every other stop, there's more people laying down in front of the tracks, and you can't get anything moving. So Andretti Global is so committed to joining F1 that it spent millions of dollars building a car for a wind tunnel test in Germany a week ago. A week ago, they did this. And Michael Andretti said we had to roll the dice because no one is coming to play with them in the yard. And they'd had a dinner honoring Stefano Domenicali at the National Italian American Foundation. Michael Andretti sent congratulation texts. No one answered. He gets ghosted. Mario Andretti also helped honor him, and they basically ghosted him. They were sort of searching for them in Austin. And it feels like that Andretti and GM, Cadillac, right, need to know basically like yesterday if they're going to be racing in 2025 to get stuff moving. And no one's given them any idea. It's just a little bizarre to me that this is in this sort of limbo state because it feels like they're kind of trying to run the clock out on them to some extent. So they don't have an engine supplier. They won't be prepared.
did you hear? I saw this today and I didn't even put it in the notes. But have you heard the latest thing, which is you ever seen The Matrix?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so you know when he distracts him with the lady in the red dress,
Yes.
and then says, "Look again," and it's Agent Smith, right? So that kind of put the honeypot in front of somebody to break the whole thing up. I read something today where Audi are apparently they've had a change of senior leadership. Who is not as committed to F1. So now there's this little bubbling story about whether Audi are going to back out of being in there. And they've gone after, I think, General Motors to say, hey, General Motors, if you want to come in and be like Sauber's engine supplier instead, like leave that Andretti guy behind. You can still come in, General
I
Motors, to the sport. I'm like, really? That just feels like another underhanded kind of,
trying to cut their
okay,
engine supplier away from them.
yes, try to cut the engine supplier away or try to at least destabilize the whole thing.
I did see
General
this. Not
Motors,
today,
General
but I saw it
Motors
this
will
week.
General Motors will go, oh yeah, okay, we're in, and then let the divorce happen, and then Sauber will go, oh no, it's all right, Audi, you're all right.
Yeah, it's a mess. I just don't like the way this is going down. There's
Nah,
not enough of a framework they're following. It just feels like they're winging it every time. And a couple last things from last week, just to close out. So after Austin, right, it was fascinating. Let's hold the DQs aside for a second, the Dairy Queens. Let's hold those aside. Lee, I'm pretty sure it was Lee, and if it wasn't Lee, I apologize, on the Discord had a stat that they posted, and I hadn't seen it anywhere else. It basically said in 2023, from Bahrain through Austin, let's look at how cars have developed. And they showed basically who's the fastest car, obviously Red Bull. And then I don't quite know how they calculated the gap from Red Bull, if whether it was at Austin or what, but it was McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes, so jives kind of with the top teams and on below. And they said who's gotten closest to Red Bull from where they started. And obviously the biggest gainer is McLaren. That's not a surprise. Rob, you and I talked about it when the season started. They knew their beginning car was not the answer. They were had redeveloped and said it'll take some time. It wasn't really an upgrade they brought in Austria. It was the real car, right? They were racing like the skeleton car for a while. So they're by far the largest gainer, and they've gone up. The other gainers in terms of getting closer to Red Bull, Mercedes, Alpine a tiny bit, but at least they're not a loser. Alpha Tauri with a big gain, which we'll obviously talk a lot about today relative to Mexico. And Alfa Romeo, the biggest loser of the entire group, should not be a surprise, and this is the reason I brought this up, Aston Martin.
Yeah.
Aston Martin and Haas, they fell down big style. And I look at this and I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, and when I looked at this, I was like, okay, it's not a surprise that McLaren. Actually, what did surprise me about McLaren is, okay, the amount they pulled in on Red Bull shouldn't be a surprise because, like you say, they started this season with the Flintstones car that
Right.
Lando had to pedal it with his feet, and then they actually brought the engine in Austria, right? Okay, great. Therefore, they must have closed in the most. Fine. They're actually second to Red Bull in the how far they are behind now. So not only have they closed the gap the
Right.
most, which in theory they should because they're one of the worst cars, they've leapfrogged everybody else.
Right.
They're second now in the standings in terms of chasing down Red Bull, which is phenomenal to have gone from zero to hero in the space of a season. I mean, McLaren deserve a lot of kudos for, like they said, we broke it. Yeah, we broke it first. We didn't break it first, but we mentioned how we'd seen that story coming out right at the beginning of the season when McLaren admitted and basically went, "Yeah, we've kind of screwed this up."
Well, I remember you found that and you hit it hard, and I didn't believe you, and you're totally true. But they are right there with Ferrari and Mercedes, which is what we see on track. We see three teams right behind Red Bull, all now actually challenging people a little bit, which is fun. And the last thing from last week, we talked about this. When Max was getting booed, I was trying to figure out, is this normal Team LH booing Max? And I said I didn't feel like it. Is this Checo fans, because we heard the Checo chant during the booing, fans booing him? And I said that's what it felt like. Or was this for the governor, because he's not a wildly popular man when he came out on the podium? But it felt like the Checo thing. It was obviously the Checo thing. We'll get into it in the video vault as well. But they had to bring bodyguards for Max to the Mexican Grand Prix because of the hostility aimed at the Dutchman. The good news is Max gave up the bodyguards midway through the race and let them go to Charles because he needed them after the race. But that is a different story. So let's talk a little bit about the video vault. I know last week I didn't have videos. Big disappointment not to have
I let the
videos.
door open. I let the door open. Last week, you had to go and hang your head in shame in the corner and think about what you'd done. But this week, you're back with a vengeance.
I am. And the door's open. Let's hit it. So first off, the BWT Alpine F1 team open doors at the United States Grand Prix.
You just opened the door.
I did. The vault is open. Their doors are open. Star-studded lineup stateside on the Alpine channel, 12 minutes. You kind of gotta want to see this one. This isn't gonna just flow because, again, the way they do their open doors, if you haven't seen them, it's just a behind-the-scenes thing. But this time, there's a little more talking to camera. They've had some where it's just basically like you're an inanimate object floating behind people for 10 minutes. You're like, what am I doing here? This one's a little better. There's some talking to camera. There's NBA. There's hashtag Pukey content. Pierre and Yuki get into some hijinks. Check it out if you're interested. Number 2, I really like the second one. Alex and Logan take on the Texas Taste Test on the Williams channel, 7 minutes. So they do a barbecue food tasting. I got so hungry watching this. I wanted so much barbecue. I'm like, man, where is the brisket in my life? It was really good. Alex, and while Logan drove this one, he's the American, it's American barbecue. Alex is becoming our food tasting expert, right? We've seen them do this in Singapore. You and I talked about the British channel where they did Korean food and he did a whole thing. Alex is like becoming a YouTube star in his own right.
But for food, right? So do you think that maybe there's some kind of breakout where Yuki finally opens his restaurant and Alex becomes the food critic? I mean, is there a little like F1 restaurant thing going over there?
100%. That's brilliant. Although, what'll Yuki be making? It'll be macaroni and cheese or something.
As long as he can swear while he's making it, it doesn't really matter, is it?
Totally. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri play Who's Most Likely To on the McLaren channel, 8 minutes, sponsored by their partner FX Pro. This was a little bit fun, right? I'm enjoying, it's obviously not Carlando, but I'm enjoying this current McLaren pairing. It feels like they were cold and stiff to start the year. Maybe Oscar feeling his way in F1, I don't know. Lando's seems like a little tough to get to know. They seem to be having a little bit more fun. I enjoyed this one. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, I saw a little bit of this. I didn't see the whole 8 minutes. What I would say is that Oscar, to me, is he's quite deadpan. And I think it takes a while for people to get used to his sense of humor. You can see that just through some of them. I don't even remember what race it was now, where someone crashed out and it flicked to him in the garage, and he's drinking his drink. He's like, And he just pulled that face, and it was meme worthy straight away. He's very deadpan, and I think it took a while for those two to find. The Carlando thing was just a lot more in your face. They were
Yeah.
both more extroverts and fun, but Oscar's a funny guy, and these two now. Not that I really care about whether or not teammates have fun, but it is interesting watching it kind of come
Well,
along. So,
let's put a pin in
and
the teammate idea for
I was going to say,
one
let's
video.
put a pin because I actually thought it played out quite well today. So we'll come back to that
Really
later. Yeah.
fascinating. I think it was the bodyguards, but okay. An unrelated video, how he designed the car. I'll drive upside down on Driver 61. So Driver 61 has had a lot of great Formula One content and other videos. We've talked about it here. It's Scott Mansell, I want to say, not related to Nigel. I usually love his videos. He compares different series and different cars and different tracks. I love this idea. Everyone says you can drive a car upside down on a tunnel ceiling because of the downforce, which would then be upforce. It would hold it up there. And there've been 2 or 3 videos as they launched this idea recently, and I watched this because I'm curious. And every single time I've watched any of these videos, I've fallen asleep, and I don't know what that means. Like, they're not long, and I cannot make it more than 4 minutes in. I fall asleep. I wake up like this is still on, and it's 2 minutes later. I'm like, I don't understand. This guy is putting me to sleep every time. I wish I had something better to say, Scott. I'm sorry for that. And the last one, Rob. Let's talk about this one for a second. Normally we just hit the video, we move on. Why everyone at Oracle Red Bull Racing loves Checo Perez. On the Oracle Red Bull Racing channel, 11.03 minutes. Let's get our tinfoil hats on and discuss. So I watched this, and I wanted to love this, and I did. It's a great video about Checo. And I've been a Checo fan. I loved when he was the tire whisperer. I liked watching him at the lower salaried teams doing things with cars people shouldn't be able to do. Seems like a great dude. And then this video happens. After all of the bluster, will he have a seat? Does he have a contract? His fans booing Max. Will he retire? All of this crap. Just, he hasn't made it to Q3 enough. He never is near Max. And then Red Bull drops the hastily made We Love Checo video so that no one gets kidnapped by a cartel member in Mexico, or so that Max doesn't need bodyguards, or so that people stop talking about Checo's contract. And all this did for me was make me think this is his farewell video. They just dropped it a little early. I mean, where are you at, Rob? I'd love your thoughts.
Well,
I watched this from the beginning thinking, what in the hell is this?
so I watched it and I thought it was a great video. And then I saw you post from our account. I was very tempted to distance myself from the post that you put out there because you came across as being very anti-Checo in this
I love
post.
Checo.
But no, but you weren't. Um, I really don't like to admit this very often on this here pod because I like to make you a bit of a figure of fun and sort of Brian overthinks things yet again. So I thought, well, okay, Brian's put this tweet out there to say, really, why on earth have you done this? And I kind of watched it and thought it was okay. So I thought I'd give it another watch. And I think I said to you when we spoke the other day, I was like, yeah, it was almost like a Checo obituary. It was like the guy, if you just put a vignette around the video, it'd be like the guy had died. It was, yeah, and it felt like it was cobbled together. It hadn't been something that had been planned for a long time. There weren't
No.
lots of clips from the entire season. It was almost like clips from the last 2 races where they'd gone, we need to do something to boost Checo's morale. And they were going to be in Mexico for his home GP, and he needs like a little bit of a feel-good factor because everyone thinks Danny Rick's going to take his seat. So could you just say some nice things to camera? And the people they got to do it were kind of like, when you watched it the second time through that lens, they were like, almost like they were reading off auto cue. Yes, we love Checo. He's a
There were
great
3
guy.
people
It
who
was
filled the whole thing. And then like his engineer or his mechanic from 1 year of karting who didn't speak any English and was walking away from camera. I'm like, who filmed this?
Yeah, so
All
I
right,
have to eat humble pie and say I apologize, Brian, for giving you grief for the first post you put on our account because you were right, you nailed it.
It
There we
felt
go.
weird. It
That's
felt
as
weird.
close you have. That's as close you're ever going to get to an apology
Well,
from me. So
I
let's
appreciate
move
that.
on.
So with that, let's close the door and move on to the race. I won't even go into all the tinfoil hat conspiracy around the video that we found. But then it was
Oh
race
my God.
week.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. No, let's not go into the conspiracy. All I'm going to say is if you do like conspiracy theories, look at the exact length of the video and look at the seconds that it lasts for and then go down a rabbit hole.
Why?
and
Because
decide.
11 is Checo's number, but 3 is Danny Rick's number? Hi-oh.
Oh, I wasn't going to go there. I was going to do the red and the blue pill from the Matrix and let
Yeah.
people go down the rabbit hole. But
All
anyway, yes. So Mexican GP arrives this week. Practice, I gotta be honest, I didn't see a whole heap of it live.
I
I
didn't see
kind of
any of
tried
it.
to catch up on it a little bit. You didn't see any of it, okay?
Yeah,
So main things I took away were reserve drivers everywhere in FP1. There just
right.
seemed to be.
Heard about
It
that.
was one of those races where they let the reserve drivers have a go, and especially in FP1, all the cars seemed to be breaking down because of altitude issues. Now, let's hit this now, Brian, because we've got a lot to talk about in the race. So let's get the boring stuff out of the way. Even during the race, there was a lot of lift and coast and
Yes.
temperature regulation, all this kind of stuff. Should they be racing in high altitude if the
Yes.
cars can't deal with it properly?
Yes. If the car can't
Yeah.
deal with it properly, what do we have to find a perfectly smooth track with perfect
No, no,
temperatures?
no, no.
These are cars, man. These
No.
come
Just
on.
yeah, but just the. It's like everywhere else in the world, they can race fine. They can go pedal to the metal and all this kind of stuff. Today, everyone's having to lift and coast because well, we're a little. The air's a bit thin, so we can't really race properly. It's like if you can't race properly, why have a Formula One car where we can't really go all out? It just
So what you're
I
saying
didn't
is
like
someone
that.
should
That's all.
develop a diesel engine and bring it only to this race because you don't
No,
need
I'm
the
just sort of
turbo.
saying maybe let's just maybe not race in Mexico City.
Nah,
Let's just not do the altitude because
yeah, I
anyway,
get it. I liked the
yeah,
people. Who was it? Like Alpine cut extra holes in their cooling. They had extra louvers in their cooling lid. Ferrari, I think, did too, or someone else. Aston Martin. Aston Martin, by the way, I watched them race with limited interest today, and I felt bad when Fernando retired, and then Lance did something to Valtteri. We'll talk about it in a little bit. I got a lot
Valtteri
of
did something to Lance, but we'll talk
yeah.
about that later.
So yeah, I didn't
But
see the practice,
so
but
biggest
Albon was fast. Ferrari didn't seem
album
to
was
have a ton of
fast.
pace
Yeah,
necessarily.
Ferrari we didn't get to see their pace at all. So FP1 and FP2 you never worry about
Right.
pace. FP3 is normally where everyone takes their markers. Anybody who's playing fantasy looks at the pace from FP3 and picks their fantasy teams based on what they see in FP3, or plus any maybe historical knowledge about the track. FP3, Ferrari got basically blocked by every single piece of traffic going. People that weren't even on the track were blocking them. So we didn't even get to see we got to see nothing. So it's like but they when they have had track time, they looked a bit slow. So let's all discount Ferrari. And then Quali came around. Quali Q1. Everyone's trying to save tires, so all the big brainiacs go. Let's try and go out on
Let's do
mediums
some
and
medium
bank
runs
some.
early.
Yeah,
Yep.
let's do some medium runs and see if we can bank some laps, so we don't have to waste a set of softs in Q1. And that worked for a whole heap of people, unless your name was Lando Norris.
God, I felt so. First of all, he goes out on the first run in quali and has a fuel issue of some kind and doesn't even get a lap in. He comes back into the pits, goes back out in the middle on mediums. He didn't do a great job of it. And then was this when Alonso spun? I can't remember if it was an FP1 or sorry Q1. Yeah, it was when Fernando lost it and Lando was on his last lap giving it a shot and didn't get it in. So he's out. He's out. Ruined his race. It helped me in fantasy because he's going to get a boatload of overtakes and positions gained, which is the opposite of the way this should work. The game is fundamentally broken. We'll get into that more later. But yeah, we lost Lando, Logan, Lance, Esteban, and K-Mag in Q1. But you're right. Lando took the brunt of this idea, this medium tire idea. It just did not work for
Yeah,
him.
I mean, it could have worked, like you say. I mean, he just kind of got the rough end of the deal, and it could have worked out beautifully, but coulda, shoulda, woulda, and it didn't.
Yeah, yep.
So,
I,
yeah. So then we moved on through to. Oh, go on. Yeah, go on.
I was gonna say, in Q1, the other story that came up that again was a nothing burger, but Max and George camped at the end of the pit lane on the way to get out,
Oh.
and the FIA has said we'd rather have them do that in the pit lane than on track, so we're not going to give them penalties. What? Like George actually came to a
Yeah.
complete stop. Max's didn't feel as bad. I'm waiting for the Williams to come out next week and just go side by side and stop at the exit of the Brazilian pit lane and wait for about minute 50 left and go out and be the only cars to get a lap in. Show me the precedent. I mean, like that is ridiculous. That's if I were Williams, that's what I would do. Just give it a shot.
Yeah. No, agree. It's. I don't like this. When did this start being a thing? By the way,
I remember
this
Max
this
doing it a
camping out
couple
at the end.
times, but like I know others have done it. It happens frequently. It just he gets a lot of attention. I don't want to put it all on Max, but he has done it a couple times in the last 5 or so races.
Yeah. Yeah. It just all of a sudden seems to be this thing that we're dealing with now that people are camping out in the pits because they. It seems to be this like area where you can just like not get punished. But
Yeah.
so Where were we? Q2.
Q2, who'd we lose?
So we thought we'd lost Sonoda, Alonso, Hulkenberg, Gasly, and Zhou. That was what it was. Zhou got pipped right at the last minute and got squeezed out, and it was going to prevent Alfa Romeo from getting both their cars through to Q3 for a long time. Okay, so Zhou's getting out of his car, and then lo and behold, Albon got his time deleted, and Zhou's back in again. So you see scenes of Zhou running around the garage trying to get back into the car again, ready for
Strap me in.
Q3. It was. I mean, we didn't really see too much track limits here, but when they showed the onboard, yeah, Albon, like, I mean, there was a corner and he just decided to go straight through the inside of it. I mean,
Yeah. So, question for you in Q2 then. So, we talked about Q1. In Q2, Yuki did 2 runs where he gave Danny Rick a slipstream. He set no official times. So they had speed in that Alpha Tauri, and they had to have noticed it in Q1 or in practice. So they get to Q2, and Danny Rick's like fourth. And they're saying, you know what? This is pretty good. Let's do another slipstream from Yuki. Why? Why give up Yuki when you think... did no one on the pit lane say, you know what? He might make it on his own, Danny Rick, with the first slipstream. Maybe we can get Yuki through and we can do the slingshot. You know, the shake and bake slingshot again, like like Will Ferrell
yeah,
and John C.
Yuki,
Riley in Q3. But he had no time. He was eliminated with no time in Q2.
so Yuki was going to start at the back at the pit lane because
Right.
he was going to have to change a power unit, right? So
Correct.
they knew that he was going to have to do that. But I'm with you. It's like, okay, just because you know he's going to start from the back, why not let him get through to Q3 with Danny and see if he can help Danny out again?
Exactly. Could you
I'm with
imagine
you.
if you could give him a slipstream in
I hate
Q3?
agreeing with you twice in a row,
Yeah.
but yeah, I know.
I was literally running
So
around
anyway, we get
in
through.
front of the TV like, let him get him one time. You might make it. But they didn't even do it. Anyway, so we go to Q3, and the most
So we come
bizarre
through-
thing happened.
Yeah,
I'd
we
like
come
your
through to
thoughts on as a Ferrari fan. What did you see in Q3? Because it freaked me out.
Well, I want to talk to you about it just to make sure I'm still not living some kind of dream that didn't actually happen. Because, okay, both Ferraris have made it through to Q3, but they haven't showed lightning pace. They've
No.
kind of, in Q2, they kind of just made it through. There was no kind of like setting the leaderboard alight and making it through. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put my Ferrari hat to one side here and just see if somebody can take pole off Max. But you know, they're not going to be red, whatever the color of the car is. And then I'm sitting there and I'm watching the cars go round, and I don't remember the order of it. Somebody, probably Max, has already put like a placeholder on the board. It's okay, that's probably going to be pole. And then Ferraris come round, and suddenly someone's like given them the Mario mushroom for this one little. I don't know what it was. I've read these whole reports about the track temperature, the tire rubber, the track rubbering in. There was like this holy grail of a little micro window of about 3 laps that it existed for, and then the temperature or whatever changed again, and all the stars aligned, and Ferrari go nail the front row of the. I mean, what the hell?
I don't know. It was so bizarre to
I,
me. It was like,
I was looking at it a couple of times going, this can't be right. After showing no pace literally in every session, every practice, Q1, Q2, nothing, talk about poker face.
wait, more than that. FP1, FP2, FP3,
Yes, sorry, yep.
Q1, Q2, and then like, oh, sorry, we were using the wrong pedal. And it's like all of a sudden, like, here we go. And it wasn't just Charles, it was both cars. It was Carlos and
Yes.
Charles up there. And I'm like, huh? And then Max got a chance at the end to do a lap in rebuttal, if you will. And the Ferraris didn't go faster, but Max didn't go faster either. And I'm like, this
No,
is...
nobody did. It was
No
the
one
first qualifying that I can remember for a long time where on that second push lap where you're thinking, right now, who's going to take it? Who's going to
Yeah,
take
nothing
it?
changed.
We're looking at the timings and everything's in that yellow, like, because they're not gaining. It's like everyone's doing a slower lap. There literally was this kind of perfect storm of conditions that existed for that little microcosm, and Ferrari just lucked out and got 1 and 2. I mean, that kind of masked to some degree, although it wasn't lost on social media, that Danny Rick outqualified Perez
Yes.
in Alpha Tauri.
In all 3 qualies. He was ahead of him for each session, but then Formula Fury noticed, hey, he also outqualified both Mercs and McLarens in Q3. What?
I know. So that set us up for race day. where all eyes were kind of like, what's Lando going to do from back there? What's going on? And when they all lined up, it was like everybody on the grid was on mediums, apart from Lando that went softs because he had to try and make up some places in the
Right.
back, and Albon and Ocon went hards. Okay, fine. So we've pretty much got everyone doing the same strategy, apart from three drivers that are going to try and mix things up. Okay, so let's see what happens. Lights out and away you go. Oh my God. I don't even think that sentence had finished coming out of Crofty's mouth before Perez was out of the race. I
Well,
mean,
so watching this, it didn't look like a bad start from either Charles or Carlos. It looked like Max had an amazing start.
oh,
And he
Max,
goes and splits the
do you know
Ferraris at
Mario
first.
Kart when if you if
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
watching the three,
And you
two,
hit it on
one, and you
two, you
and
can
you and
take
you hit it
off.
on two, you can get the
Yeah.
turbo start. Max got the turbo
And
start today,
and
hundred
for
percent.
a three-time champion now, who has had basically almost a perfect year, which we'll hit in the stats. The only thing you could probably say about him this season is his starts have been less than perfect.
Yes, yeah.
This was the flip of that. It wasn't slow. It wasn't good. It was Mabaduchi, Babada perfect. It was amazing. Like, you could not have chef's kissed this any better, and he just blew away the boys in red. And as he's doing this, Checo also apparently hit the same button at the same time, and he's like, "Look at me, ma, I'm making it." And he goes around the outside, and I got my cars confused in the whole chaos here, and I see a Red Bull on the outside turn in on Charles, and they go up in the air and they go flying, and I go, "Oh my God, Max is out of the race." No, it was Checo, and it was on him. And the more onboards they showed and the more replays, it's on. He turned in onto Charles, who had nowhere to go.
And the worst thing of all of this is, like, Checo really. We've been down on him recently, and okay, yeah, I think it was
Recently,
his fault.
since Miami, basically.
Yeah, that's recent, right? In terms of the how
Yep.
long I've been
Yeah.
alive, Miami is recently. So um, he turned in, and okay, yeah, he should have tried to take the outside line a little bit longer, and he might have stayed in the race. However, the reason Charles had nowhere to go is on the one time that Checo absolutely nails the start and gets a flyer down the outside and wants to then turn in around the outside. Charles can't go anywhere because who's right to the other side of him? Max, who's just had also the best start ever. So you had like almost four cars going into that first corner. You had two Ferraris, two Red Bulls. The two Ferraris got bogged down. The two Red Bulls were on fire, which meant we got four into the corner, which doesn't go.
No.
And it all concertinas along. And when Perez turns in early to try to take the corner, you've got to think, as we've both said before, I mean, me and you being like highly skilled professional
Yeah.
drivers as
We
that
know
we are,
wheel.
we know we all like you can't turn in that early because you
No,
must acknowledge there's got to be multiple cars on the inside of you. He turns in, that car went a long way in the air.
it did.
I mean, I hadn't realized it at the beginning when we saw the impact because we were kind of like head on, so you lose a little bit of perspective. So when Checo spins it around and joins, and he's at the back of the back of the grid, kind of coming back, I'm like, okay, Checo's got to do a charge from the back now. We've seen him do this before. He can probably do this again. I've just transferred him into my fantasy team, by the way, because I thought he was going to have an amazing Mexican GP. And I'm thinking, okay, now I'm going to get a ton of overtake points because he's going to be absolutely got the bit between his teeth. And then he's in the pits and it's obvious they're retiring. They show the replay from the side and how high that car
Yeah,
goes up.
yeah.
And when it comes down, how much of it just vibrates and
What? And he
bits
had no
fall off.
side
And
pod on the right. The
oh
whole
my
right side pod
gosh,
was ripped off, and
rear suspension flapping everywhere. It's like,
wasn't it Spa
oh
last
God.
year where Lewis ran over Fernando's front tire and Fernando called him an idiot? But Lewis was up in the air, and things start leaking. Hydraulics, water pumps, everything
Yeah,
starts
yeah.
going. You're not F1 cars don't fly. This ain't kit. Can't turbo boost. So we knew that was happening. At this point, though, Piastri took George in the back a bit. Charles has the wing hanging off, and I have some people over, and we're all yelling, "Where's the meatball flag? Where's the black and orange flag? Where's Kevin Magnussen's flag of his country?" Where he gets this every time. Didn't he have like two or three in a row last year where he had the end
He
plate hanging off, and they
he
kept
did.
giving him the flag?
But they normally give 2 or 3 laps of leeway before they
Right.
start waving the meatball. Now, what Charles got lucky with, I think the meatball was coming for him,
But
and
it fell off.
then the end plate went bye bye. Now, as with everything in the world, Lady Luck plays a big factor in these types of things. So, had the end plate fallen off somewhere or just skidded off to the side of the road and nobody would have cared, we would have carried on racing. But no, Charles's end plate decides to kiss goodbye to the car and land in the braking zone, or at least in the outside of the braking zone. So we get a VSC. I actually thought that might go full safety because I thought they're going to have to send a marshal to run onto the track to get it, but we didn't. We didn't. So now we get probably into the most boring phase of the race, I think, and it lasted for about 10 laps where
I would
Max
disagree, but okay.
disappeared off into the distance.
Yep.
Okay, Max disappeared onto the distance. There was a DRS train from Hulkenberg all the way down to K-Mag, so we had a Haas.
Nico Hulkenberg drove a lot of DRS trains this week.
He did.
He was
He
a
did.
conductor. He basically had a train going from Mexico City to like Cancun and back, and he just kept running it over and over and over again.
And I think you put on here, I put all aboard the Haas DRS train, and you put engine and caboose because they had K-Mag and Hulkenberg at one end, and nobody could do anything because the DRS, and we'll come to this later because I think me and you maybe slightly disagree here, but the DRS just wasn't strong enough if you weren't in a Red Bull or you weren't in a tyre offset, that no one seemed to be able to get past Hulkenberg, which I found really, really bizarre because the Haas has been an absolute bag of bolts, but nobody, even with DRS, could get past it to break the DRS train.
Fast enough on a straight to keep everybody behind.
Yeah, so we had not a lot really going on. Lewis was getting frustrated behind Danny Rick for a while, but he finally nailed him and got him there. But once Lewis got past Danny Rick, we kind of had him catching the Ferrari. So now suddenly I'm thinking, okay, based on last week, now that Lewis is unleashed, he's going to chase down the Ferraris, he's going to dispatch the Ferraris, and maybe Lewis is going to take it to Verstappen. So at this point, about 17 laps into the race, I'm still fairly optimistic we're going to get a race for the lead at this point. Now, I realize how stupid that is in retrospect now that we're coming to record this, but kind of did think that. Then we went into a bit of a phase where everyone, even if you're not trying to overtake someone, everyone's pulling to the right to try to get out of the hot air and try to cool their cars down because the altitude is playing havoc with everybody. I don't know. I'll ask you your opinion on this, Brian. So I'm watching this, and Hulkenberg is conducting this train, like you said. Gasly's behind him in the Alpine that me and you have both said early on in the season was a slippery, fast car. They might not have been the greatest car, but straight line speed, they were quick.
Yeah.
He can't get past him. What happened to Alpine? Me and you, we haven't really spoken about Gasly and Ocon on this for a while because Alpine have done nothing recently.
So I actually think, if I may, first of all, Hulkenberg. All aboard the train. Choo-choo. He took over the Fernando Alonso, DRS train rights from last season. I think Alpines were faster last year, and I think there's a little bit stuck in our memory, and we wanted to believe that the first three races. But I've gone back and I've thought about it. Australia, they crashed into each other in the second race or third race, and they were faster. They were more slippery than they are now. But that Renault engine is so down on power compared to others. And we saw this at Monza, right? This is where it became clear. They have a dog of an engine under that hood or trunk. And so as I look at it, I agree. I don't know. Gasly had a decent race last week. I forgot he was on the grid for a couple races. I mean, I just haven't seen him. I love Pierre, but I didn't even know he was still racing. I didn't know he was still in F1. I haven't seen him for a while. I will agree with you a little bit. It did get a little bit of a lull here until Max boxed on 19. Basically, I just sat there watching cars go around, and we were excited. But then Max goes in and boxes on 19. Box, Max comes in, and I'm thinking, okay, this is a two-stopper. You cannot make it to 71 on a set of hards. You're not going 52 laps on a set of hards when you went 20 or 19 on a set of mediums. There's no way. And I'm curious to see, do other people follow? And I'm waiting, and nobody from the top 7 pitted as well. It was just Max. And at this point, I'm sitting there with a couple guys, and we are saying, oh my God, we may have a strategy difference here to put a little spice in this race to make it interesting. And so we're kind of watching this like, ooh, when are other people going to box? In particular, Lewis and Charles. When are they going to pit? And we'll get to that in a second. But I was really excited because at this point, Red Bull went early. No one else followed them. And now we have maybe the makings of a different strategic approach. And I was excited for it. But at this point, I'm like basically watching it. And I'm like, all right, So, what's happening? Not much. Carlos was losing touch with Charles. Like both of them, we didn't see much after the start out of them. Then Lewis came in on 25 to go to hards, so he got his mediums and hards in. I'm thinking, all right, but 25 still too early to make it to the end, probably. You're right. I would like to redact some of my notes here. DRS maybe wasn't too powerful. First of all, it only mattered on the home straight, right? The back straight, it didn't really do much.
Yeah, it was too short.
Way too
wasn't
short.
It?
Never going to do anything. Not for anybody. But you're right. It was like you could stay in touch with most people, sometimes get close enough, but not often make a move. Red Bull, it was fast when Max. I mean, I don't know if we saw him using it. I can't even remember. But so
Max when he came out on those hards, he was just like a missile.
Right,
he just
right.
He like a whole bunch of people up. And then we also saw that when people had come in for the hards and people were trying to extend the medium, we had a little window where DRS was overpowered, because if you were on new hards versus people that were trying to defend old mediums, you just cruised by people on that DRS straight. But it was a real small window. I think it was only either if you were Max or if you were on a tire offset.
Agreed.
So that little
right.
window.
I agree with you. Look at us agreeing here.
Look at that. Wow.
But so then we keep this running, and Carlos pits on 30. Joe's got something burning in his car that he can smell. And then here's where I thought it got really interesting, and then wildly uninteresting within like a millisecond of each other. One, Charles pits on lap 32, 13 laps later than Max. A 71-lap race. He's going to hards. He did medium for 32. He needs hards to go for, what is that, 37? He can do this. And I'm thinking to myself, or 39. He can do this. This will be great. Like, we are going to see a one-stopper from Charles and a two-stopper from Max. Charles comes out.
Max was on a one-stopper.
Was he, you think?
Yeah, I think he was.
From 19?
Yeah.
Oh, man, we got to get Hannah Schmitz on the phone and find out what the plan actually was. And I'm so excited for this. We're sitting there, and we're like, oh, my God, Max is going to have to box again. Charles is done. He'll come out behind Charles, and then he's going to have to catch him. And Carlos is his rear gunner, and Carlos has learned how to defend this year. And we are there for it. And then Kevin Magnussen goes off the track onto the dirty side of the track, the dirtiest side of the track. And I'm like, well, that's not a good job by K-Mag. I have to go to the bathroom. So I walked out to pee, and everyone starts yelling, Brian, and I come back in, and he had crashed. And so then we have the whole situation unfold with the safety car and red flag and all of the things I hoped would happen. One stop, two stop, didn't matter anymore. But it
doesn't matter, because even forget all that for a minute, right? Just think about even when Charles finally pitted, he came out, what was it, 14, 15 seconds behind Max? This is the point where one stop has just unfolded amongst everybody. He's lost so much time. I couldn't believe how far clear. Like, Max basically caught everybody up. Before they all came in and made their pit stop, Max had closed all of that 20-second that he'd lost through pitting. By the time Lewis and Charles and everybody else went in for their pits, Verstappen could see them. Like, oh my God. And I think this kind of got lost today in a lot of the narrative, is that how fast was Max driving to basically have made up an entire pit stop by the time those guys went in to go and pit? I mean,
not only that, what happened after the red flag? I mean, he just drove off to the sunset.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. So let's just humor you for a second that Max was going to have to stop again, right?
And maybe saying he wasn't going to win, but it would have set something up. Yeah, I agree.
It might have set something up, but the fact that even when all of them had only made one stop, he basically negated an entire pit stop, even if he'd had to stop again. I think Max today, although we didn't really see much on TV, witness protection for Max today, he was in a league of his own today.
I agree.
He got no TV coverage because he was just so good and so far ahead of everyone. It was boring to watch him.
But if he'd had to pit late in the race to get another compound of whatever he liked on, at this point he'd satisfied the two compound rule. He comes out behind Carlos, Lewis, and Charles, and he has to go through them with, let's say, 20 laps to go. And I know the DRS is powerful. You think it'd be easy? I don't. I think at
I
that
do. I
point,
do.
oh no, I think we would have seen some
Because
real defending.
because they would have all been no, and there would be no defense. This is the problem because it was almost like one of those classic movie foreshadowings earlier on when we saw the delta between old tires and new tires and the DRS. If you imagine those guys are all say like holding on for dear life for a one stopper, and Max has got fresh tires on. They would have been sitting ducks in those DRS zones. It probably would have taken him 3 laps to go past all three of them. One DRS for each
I
of
don't
them.
know
He went
about
ding,
that.
ding,
I
ding,
mean, I
ding.
agree it might
Well,
have been
okay,
easy,
but
but I would have liked to have seen them defend. I would have liked to have seen
I would have
Carlos
liked to have seen it. So
a little late under braking, cutting left, and seeing what Max does. I would have liked to seen that happen in the last 10 laps. It would have been a battle for the top for first. We didn't. We got
I
robbed
don't.
of all
I
of that.
don't. No, I don't think it would have gone as far as the last 10. I think you're sipping the crazy juice there if you think it would have taken Max as long as the
Maybe.
last 10
I
to
don't
have
know.
got them.
We ended up having the
Anyway,
top 6
so we
separated
had
by like 5 seconds each at the end of this thing.
we had K-Mag crashed, and on face value, when they showed the onboard, it looked like a horrendous screw up by K-Mag that he just lost it in the middle of a corner. And then when they showed the reverse from behind the car, I think it was his right rear, the suspension just kind of went good night,
Well,
folded, and
but what are the
it just
odds
seemed
of
to
it
snap
happening?
as he went over the curb.
Right.
And
But what are the odds of it happening
what are the
one
odds?
lap after he's off the track for an entire section where he's running in the dirt and the dirty stuff? I gotta
Oh, it
believe
could
they're
have been that.
related
Yeah, I mean,
somehow. Something happened, or the two are.
agree.
They're not completely disconnected, but
But it wasn't.
It
It wasn't
K-Mag.
driver error through
No,
that corner.
100%
He
no.
went through the corner. The right rear folded, and he just was a passenger into the barrier. They had to red flag the whole thing because they had to repair the barrier. Now, I have to give a shout out to my middle child. He goes by the name of Owen, and he was very, very disappointed of the red flag rules. The fact that Max can be X seconds ahead, and a restart means that you lose all of that. He's come up with a new rule to fix Formula One. When the race gets red flagged, every car just needs to, within a couple of seconds, just stop where they are out on track. You just come to a standstill, you turn the car off, you get out, you get picked up, you go back to the pits, your crew come out and they tend to your car where it is. And then when the race restarts, everyone gets driven back to their cars, gets back in, gets ready to start, and when the green light goes, you all go. So that the leader retains the lead that they've spent a lot of time building up. So that's his way of fixing Formula One, because he really wasn't happy with the red flag, just kind of like
Yeah,
concertining the whole thing up and started all over again.
negating the
I'm there
deltas.
sitting there going, this is amazing because everything gets reset and we get to have another race now for the second half of the race. But he was like, nah, you've either got to do it that way, or his second one was, if they have to come back to the pits, you keep a stopwatch of how far everybody was apart. And when the green light goes, Max goes. And if he was 10 seconds ahead, whoever was second has to wait 10 seconds, then they can pull out of the pits, and they release everybody in the delta that they were as the race was red flagged.
Ask Owen to fix safety cars then, because that safety car does the same thing. It doesn't matter.
I know.
I like it. I like it a little bit. But anyway, so at this point, I felt it had ruined Ferrari's strategy. I know you disagree that they wouldn't have been able to catch
I didn't
up.
disagree. I didn't understand how you felt that Ferrari specifically would be disadvantaged here, because the red flag is the same for everybody. Everybody gets to start again with 0 time difference. If anything, Charles got to get his front wing
Max
repaired
got 2
for
pit stops
no
basically,
delta
though, for free. He got the VS,
But-
he got the safety car pit and the red flag. They wanted him hung out to dry,
But
having to pit under green later.
Yeah, I mean, everyone gets reduced to 0 on a red flag, and Charles got to replace his nose for no charge
know.
whatsoever.
But he was doing fine without the end plate anyway. So
Fine, he was falling back from Max at a rapid rate. So,
well, I mean,
so
that happens to everybody anyway, end plate
yeah,
or
but
not.
you said you'd explain why Ferrari.
I did
specifically
already.
were
They were
crushed.
going on a one stopper. Max needed
Everyone
a 2.
was going.
The
I
red flag
didn't.
ruined it. Yeah, I think they were. I told you Hannah would tell me. I'll give her a call.
Is that it? Is that all you've got?
Yeah, how
Ferrari
many
got
times do I have to
crushed
explain
because
it
you
for
think that Max were on a 2 and Ferrari on a 1.
Yes. Yes.
But the rate they were falling behind, they wouldn't even caught him on a 2.
Yeah, they would have. Max would have come out after the second behind them.
How much were you drinking with your friends?
Apparently not enough to deal with you. So then Lando gets swallowed up on the restart. Boy, when he lost a couple spots trying to keep his car alive and stay out of trouble, and then just more people passed him again. And I'm watching this, I'm like, oh God, Lando, this is not your weekend, man. That was rough. I just it was fascinating, right? By lap 45 or 40, Lewis went onto the grass to pass Charles to get around him on the inside before we get to turn one. And the dirt that came up, there was some debate. Oh, maybe he didn't make it to the grass. What do you think that was? That's how much marbles you think there are on the inside of the track? It was a huge plume of dirt and smoke. And like, oh yeah, that's just that's normal. I'm like, no, Lewis was aggressive. Charles pushed him into the wall.
And then we get to lap 45, and this is the bit that I still don't quite understand, and maybe you can help me out here, right? Is that
Yeah,
so Lewis on the restart? I think both Mercedes decided to go on mediums, and a bunch of cars went on mediums, but the vast majority went on hards because we basically got half the race to go. And in the first stint, nobody had really got past lap 25 before they'd pitted because the mediums weren't lasting. So I'm looking at this and going, how is being on the mediums a strategy? Because they've already shown that they don't last. So
lower
how it
fuel? I don't know. Like I can't. Is
is
it the
it's
lighter car? That's the only thing I can come up with. Is the lighter car having burnt off a half a race worth of
it's
fuel?
got
But
to
I
be.
can't understand why that made such a difference. Ferrari, in a typical Ferrari fashion, came on the blower to Charles and like in 5 laps, hard tires will be perfect, medium tires will be dead. We will win. And like nothing happened. No one. It didn't affect
Nothing
it.
happened. Nothing.
Nothing.
They didn't
I
even
wrote
make
in our
it
notes,
like
Lewis won't make it onto the podium because he's going to get caught by the Ferraris. Nope, didn't happen. Not even close. Same
nothing.
thing
Like
the whole
like
rest of the race.
there was no point from now until the end of the race where the mediums looked any different to the hard.
None. None.
It's like so like
None.
the mediums were better for the first 5 to 10 laps. Then they seemed to degrade down to the same level as the hards, but they never got worse than the hards.
No.
I don't know that anybody saw that coming, but well, I guess Mercedes and a couple of others did, but it was just bizarre.
That was.
Then
So
we
then,
had
go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, then we had a little good old foreshadowing from Hollywood perspective. Yuki and Oscar were getting all racy and they had some contact. Yuki went down the inside. Yuki turned in on Oscar a little bit, drove over his rear wheel. Oscar did a brilliant job actually looking at the onboard to kind of correct it and
Yes.
stay on track. So,
Yes.
okay, so Oscar stayed ahead, that's fine. But like every great Hollywood, it deserved a sequel. And I think it was only 2 laps later that Yuki came flying down the outside. Um, I mean, Yuki turned in on Oscar again.
Yes.
I don't. Same as Perez turning in on Charles
Yes.
on turn one, right? It was like you haven't actually got ahead of him, so you probably shouldn't turn to the right just yet.
Yes. So actually, before the first run, when Yuki was getting close to Oscar in an Alpha Tauri, which was fast and racy, we haven't barely talked about Danny Rick, who had a great race. Paul, one of the guys over here, goes, Yuki's going to make a mistake trying to overtake Oscar. And he's going to scream in profanities on the radio about it afterwards. And we all laughed. And then after the first one, where there's a little contact, we're like, oh, not quite what you said, but all right. And then a couple laps later, as you said, the sequel occurs, and Yuki pulls a Checo, cuts in too early on him. And then my favorite part of the whole race, Yuki is in a car, spinning backwards off the track. Oscar's right in front of him, and you can see his hand come up and go like this. Like, what are you doing, man, in anger? He's in an F1 car going backwards after having contact with another car, spinning off the track, and he's still, instead of, like, recovering, he's so angry, he's gesticulating at Oscar as he drives by for what Yuki did. So anyway, I thought that was hilarious.
No.
In the middle, we missed Alonso retiring. I believe the cause was
Yeah.
boardom, and so he just bailed. And he's like, "I'm done with this team. Get me another one for next year."
And then we had kind of a little microcosm of this entire race, which is that Valtteri got all racy on Gasly and he was like really pushing, really getting close, but he just had to back off within a couple of laps because the car's getting so damn hot. He's like had 3 or 4 DRS runs at him and couldn't get it done. So then you could visibly see him hang back for a while and stay out on the right hand side down the straight just to get the car cooled down. It's like whatever. And then I wrote these notes far too soon. I'm like
There were a couple
Charles.
more.
I noticed was chipping away at Lewis. It was like all of a sudden he's like pulling like 2, 3, 4 tenths in a lap. I'm like, here it is. Hards are coming into their own. Come on, Ferrari, you've got this. That was pretty much the only lap it lasted for, and then Lewis pulled away again.
Oh, and then one of my favorite things, Esteban tells his team to call whomever he was coming up behind. Haas, tell him I'm going to go for it this time, and then he didn't.
So
Give
it
him a
was like
buzz. I'm coming in
I
hot.
can't even I can't even remember what baseball film it is that I remember watching when I was
So
younger, where he
bad.
like calls his shot at the end and like points. Is it like League of Their Own or something? Like
Yeah.
he like points to the outfield and
It
says,
was
"This
Major
is where
League,
the
and then he
balls go in,"
bunts.
and like Major League, is it Major League? Sorry,
Yeah.
he calls his
Jake
shot
Taylor
and then
here, and he bunts.
yeah, and then and it was like it had that Hollywood moment about it. It was Esteban like, "Tell us I'm coming, and I don't care if he tries to get in my way." It's like, "Move it or lose it, sister. I'm coming." And I'm like, well, "Okay, Esteban really fancies this."
And then he didn't
And
even get
then
close enough
really
to have a
didn't.
sniff.
She wrote in our notes, it was like another 8 laps later, and he still hasn't got past him. I'm like, you really need to be sure you're going to make the overtake if you do a big ballsy call like
Oh,
that, because
God.
you just look a bit stupid. But
Somewhere in there,
oh, we've got
Lando on the lightweight McLaren, as they burnt fuel, that car gets better. It is a end of race car. It's a good car all over, but end of race light fuel McLaren, when there's not a lot of slow speed corners, that thing is good. And it was
we
coming alive. He
we
took
missed one
Danny Ricky.
we
Go ahead.
missed one Yuki radio before we get there,
I
which
gave
is
up on Yuki already. I don't need any more
when he was
information.
when he's at the back and he's charging, and it's like the engineer's like desperately needs to give him some kind of thing to hold on to. And he's like, Yuki, you are the fastest car on the circuit at the moment. So I do not need any more information. I'm like, okay,
Oh,
Yuki,
so Lando.
go open your restaurant, and maybe you can lower your blood pressure. But,
Lando's hunting. He's basically the chef with Tourette's from Curb Your Enthusiasm. There shall be no capers in my restaurant, and then a bunch of profanity. Oh, Lando gets George on 67.
oh, sorry, no,
Yeah, keep going.
and we've moved past something. I think you were right back at the beginning of the episode. You said put a pin in it. It was the switcheroo for McLaren, which I thought
Oh
was the
God, I
epitome of
forgot about
showing
that.
how
I forgot
Oscar
about
is
that.
actually a good teammate at the moment, because Lando was blatantly quicker at Oscar at this
Yes,
point, and they came on the
I forgot
radio and they
about that.
said we're gonna switch the cars, and half a lap, even that, Oscar just pulled over and let him through. And there's a lot of teammates that wouldn't do that, and I was just thinking that is showing the dynamic in that team. That Oscar is, yes, he's good, yes, he's fast, yes, we all think he's got a great career ahead of him in Formula One, but he's a team player. He knows when it's right to listen to the team radio.
Yeah,
He didn't try to do a big I am and go, no, I've got the pace, I can hold Lando up. He just moved to one
good call.
side, let Lando through. I mean, Lando was on, as much as you said it wasn't his weekend, in terms of overtakes and driver of the day.
He drove
I mean,
well. He just had some big
yes.
mistakes that cost him going
Yes.
back on the restart and the quali situation. But and again, when that car gets light, it was fun to watch those McLarens fly around. I got to bring up one last thing, sort of in the race itself. Two last things in the race itself. One is, as I already said, Lando ends up getting George, but in the stadium section, Lance and Valtteri, friend of the pod, friend of Paul's, Valtteri, the guy who said this.
This is Valtteri Bottas, and you're listening to the dirty side of the track.
I don't think I could care for a driver any more than I do than Valtteri. I bought a hat that has no colors whatsoever. You can't even see it unless I go in the right light, because it's an Alfa Romeo hat. And so, Lance, here's my take. You ready? They're going in the stadium section, and Lance pulls what I would call a 2020-2021 Max Verstappen move, which is, I'm going to go off the racing line, I'm going to brake late, and I'm going to cut you off, but if I can keep my car on the track, it counts. And if you remember, in the 2020-2021, Max would do this all the time, so much so that they made a rule, if you go off the track doing this, you're at fault, right? You can't cut someone off like that and then not hang onto the track. And I don't mean just passing outside the track. I mean, that's not a way to race. So Lance does this. He's off the racing line. No one expected him to take this.
No, he's off the racing line. He's not off the track.
No, he's not off the track. That's correct. I'm not saying he's off the track.
Okay,
but it's a bizarre angle he's taking into this corner in the stadium section, and he basically cuts Valtteri off. And he's got to slow down wildly to get his car back under control. They get next to each other, and Valtteri may have said, well, what a move, and kind of gave him a little bit of a shove, I think. And I watched this, and I'm sitting there, and maybe the guys with me aren't big Lance fans, and they listen to the pod, and they love that Valtteri came on. And so we're all sitting there, oh, what's Lance doing? Why did Lance do that? And then watching it back a couple more times, like, yeah, Valtteri may have kind of hit him a little bit there, didn't he?
What I would say is that Lando today pulled some absolutely fantastic overtakes in places that you don't expect people to overtake in Mexico. There was one around, I think it was when he got George. It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. And when I watched the onboard replay, despite the fact that I know that he's actually overtaken him without any contact, when I watched the onboard replay, I almost kind of held my breath because I'm like, oh my God, he's going to hit George, despite the fact I know he didn't because I've just seen him overtake him. And it took a lot of balls to pull that move off. Stroll, but George almost acknowledged the fact that he'd been done in that moment and didn't fight it because Lando's pulled an absolute brilliant maneuver. He's taken the space, he's taken the corner, and George just backs out of it a little bit and kind of says, almost, I doff my cap to you. You've put a great move on me. Stroll did that to Valtteri, and I can't remember who it was in the commentary team where they just kind of said Valtteri wasn't ready to yield that overtake. And I think that was a very polite way of saying he maybe stayed on the gas a little bit longer than he should have done because he didn't want to acknowledge that he'd just been done by Stroll, who, let's face it, has been garbage for a long time since I badged him as the third best driver of the season after 3 races. And he didn't want to yield the position, and he drove into the side of him.
I disagree
I don't know if they actually gave Valtteri the penalty in the end, but
I disagree a little bit.
It was Valtteri's fault.
Little bit of disagreement. But I agree it was probably Valtteri's fault. But when Lando took George, and when we've seen other people with wild overtakes, it's like if you weren't overtaking somebody, it's usually a path, an angle, a line that would still work. Lance's line doesn't work. If Valtteri's not there, that line is dumb. There's no reason to take it. He did it to get in front of Valtteri.
No. That's a good overtake. That was a brilliant overtake on Valtteri. Yes, it was.
No.
That wasn't a late last of the last breakers and going to smash Valtteri off the track. He took a unique line through that corner, and he just got the overtake done, and Valtteri didn't back out of it.
I refuse to agree with this line of questioning.
I know, because if it's anybody else other than Lance, I think people give the credibility of a good overtake there. But because of who it is, everyone goes, "Oh, no, Stroll's rubbish. He can't possibly have done that overtake." That was
agreed to disagree.
And what I actually think might have been the cause, and maybe Pitlane Paul can send me an abusive message later to tell me I'm wrong on this, is that I actually think it was frustration from Valtteri because Valtteri was actually on the attack with. Was it still Gasly in front of him, or was it Ocon at this point? Whoever it was, Valtteri was absolutely on the charge. But what had been happening for a few laps is that while he was getting frustrated and not able to get past him, Lance had kind of cruised up behind it. And Valtteri had one last go at trying to get past whichever Alpine it was, and it hadn't come to fruition. And almost while he was taking stock of that and almost backing out again and getting ready for another attack, Stroll just came charging up the inside and said, I'll have a little bit of that. And I think that probably pissed Valtteri off. It's like, no, I'm supposed to be taking the guy in front. I'm not supposed to be losing a place behind. And I think he didn't.
All right. I'll let you have the last word being wrong.
Yeah,
and then they come around for the final, I'm cutting you off. I'm pulling a Lance on you, so don't hit me. And so as they come around the final corner, all of a sudden you see Logan dropping from 12th down.
Whoa. You've skipped a whole storyline. Danny Rick chasing George down.
Oh yeah, go for it.
You just mentioned that we haven't. You just mentioned that we hadn't covered Danny Rick, and Danny Rick has got pace to burn in the last couple of laps, and suddenly after Lando's nailed George, Danny Rick is coming alive and is chasing him down. And I wrote in the notes, I was like, he's just going to run out of laps to do this, but
it was close.
God, was it close? It got down to, I think, one of the timings I saw on the thing on the left-hand side was
0.03 or something.
It was crazy.
Well, because we watched it, and then they cut away to Max in the stadium section.
Well, because he was about to win the race. They had to.
Not yet. You could have waited another couple corners. We were furious. Put it in a little box or something. We did not see. I agree. It was exciting. Danny Rick did have pace. You're right. I shouldn't have overlooked it. But
he was very good this weekend.
Why they cut away at such the wrong time? I didn't want to see Max win. We knew he was going to win. He won by so long. We had to wait another 13 seconds to see anyone else come by. Max, Lewis, Charles on the podium.
No, finish your thought. Do you know what happened to Logan?
No, I have no idea. Do you?
Oh, no. Logan was doing an amazing job in
I
12th
know.
and was actually pressurizing 11th. And as I was watching all the cars come across
He
the
just keeps
finishing line,
dropping in the thing. Why would you pit on the last lap?
and I don't know.
It's the same distance.
Something must
Just
have happened to
stay
the
out
car.
on the track and coast. To put it in neutral and just coast through in 12th and deal with it when you cross the line and put your hazards on instead of going into the pit lane where he got credit for 70 laps, 70 laps, and then a DNF.
Yeah,
One lap short.
something must
He
have-
literally came in on the like people were taking the checkered flag, and he's like, "Nah, I'm gonna go in the pits instead." What happened? I have no idea.
Right. Well, you cover the podium. Do you know what? I'm going to live Google this while you.
Boy, this always works. All right, so the podium was Max, and then Lewis and Charles. We had Carlos, Lando, George, Danny, Rick, Oscar, Alex, and Esteban. And I will say this: a couple quick notes about Checo while Rob's Googling. When they interviewed Charles and the boos started raining down, and then we saw people in the stands fighting the Tifosi. I don't know if you saw that on Twitter. There was a brawl, well, a little brawl, a couple people fighting with Tifosi. And as I joked, Max should have given his bodyguards over to Charles at this point because Max is out there. Oh, I'm sorry. It's too bad Checo's not up here. He would have been on the podium. He's the greatest. He's my best friend. And everyone's like, yay, we love you again. Yay, you love Checo. And then Lewis was fine. And then Charles gets up there to a rousing set of boos in the stadium section. And he's like, please don't be mad at me. He did it to me. And it did not pan out for him. And then a couple people
I
on...
didn't.
Go ahead.
I didn't like the booing of Charles.
I didn't either.
And
He didn't do anything wrong.
I get it. I get it. If you're at the event and you haven't seen the replays, you think that Perez has hit Charles, therefore it's Charles's fault because he's the home favorite. But come on, guys, watch the replay. Charles just stayed in the middle and got squeezed big time. So
Checo obviously finished with no points. He didn't make it through the first turn on the first lap. And someone asked the question: has anyone ever wasted such an amazing car? Wasted is a word I would not have used. Wasted such an amazing car in the way Checo has this season. And Sean Kelly mentioned Emerson Fittipaldi in 1972 was the world champion in the John Player Special Lotus 72. He was the youngest ever champion at the time. His teammate, Dave Walker, in the same championship-winning car, had 0 points. So you know what? I feel bad.
So
I'm
Checo's
sorry,
not the
Checo.
worst. Okay.
Yeah, Checo, I like to apologize profusely. You are no Dave Walker. We know that. So yeah, kind of closing out the race before you give us an answer on Logan if you found one.
No, I didn't. I can't. People are just sort of saying, like, what happened to Logan? Why did he pit on the last lap? So I can't find anything there.
I mean, were they low on fuel and they were afraid of a DQ because they basically got it anyway? Maybe they knew the plank had been brushed a lot.
Yeah, people could smell his plank burning, and they were worried the FIA were going to inspect it.
So Rob, who do you have as our king of the pits?
You're the king of the pits.
I got to remember to turn the volume down on that for next time.
Yeah, you have. Yeah,
I mean, I can't control them individually, so I don't know what to do, but I'll figure it out.
Sorry, did you say something? My ears are ringing. I can't hear you.
We just lost all our listeners.
Okay. Is it my turn first for King of the Pits this week?
Whatever you like. I'll go first if you like.
No, I'll go first. It probably is my turn. I've got a three-way. I'm torn three ways, and then let's see if you match any of these. First off, Max just broke his own record for the number of wins in a season.
Mm-hmm.
Although we didn't see him on TV, it was an absolute masterclass. He drove off into the distance at the beginning. He didn't get phased by the red flag, and he drove off into the beginning a second time. But we didn't see him on TV, and he didn't overtake anybody really, so no one seems to really worry about that. Number one. Number two, Lando. Started in Austin and had to drive his way past everybody and got all the way up to, where did he finish? 7th or 8th in the end? Or was it higher than that?
5th.
6th, 5th, wherever it was.
5th.
Like, Lando, brilliant job. Kind of like triumph over adversity. And then you got Danny Rick taking an AlphaTauri that we've not seen having any pace for a very long time. Brilliant qualifying to out-qualify Perez and then bringing it home in wherever he brought it home, 7th. I'm going to discount Max just because of how great he is. It feels like he's been king of the pits too many times. And yes, he was brilliant. And yes, he broke his own record. But in terms of expectations, I expected Max to win, and he did. Sorry, Max. But therefore, you met my expectations, so you can't be king of the pits. So now I'm Lando or Danny Rick. Do you know what? After breaking his hand and being out for so long and dragging that bag of bolts around and making it look racy and backing up a good qualifying with a really good racing result, I'm giving Danny Rick my king of the pits.
I think that's a worthwhile vote. I'm giving it to Max. I know we've given it to him a lot, but it's one of those things, just because you won the MVP last season and you're great again this season, not everyone needs a chance. So I'm giving it to Max. Danny Rick was my backup, and I did not have Lando in the conversation. I thought he had just too many errors to be the king of the pits. He was great, and we won driver of the day for a reason. But to me, I was also debating in my third spot for a minute, Lewis or Charles, but they didn't even enter the conversation. For me, it was Max over Danny.
My only saving grace for Lando was that I don't think it was his error in qualifying that put him at 17th. It was whatever that weird, like you said, the weird thing where he went out and the fuel thing got pulled back in again, and then traffic.
Alonso's yellow flag at the end.
Yeah, so he got screwed, and then he made the best of a bad hand. But for me, it still wasn't quite enough to outdo Danny. So.
And then we have, of course, and I'll go first on the pits.
You're the pits. You're the pits.
So this one's easy. This is I can't believe I'm doing this for 4 or 5 weeks in a row. At this point, it's Checo. I didn't put him in my fantasy team, even though he looked fast in practice. I didn't put him in my fantasy team because you got to prove it to me. Like, this is the point at which where you have to show us you can actually do something, and we haven't seen it in a while. And I know people say they did the video to help him feel welcome. He's at home. I actually think there was way more pressure on him than people gave it credit for. And when you're pushing, and Valtteri said this to us on the pod here, after your first win, things get a little bit easier. Like if you're in a winning type car, and we all expected George to kind of have that unlock after winning one race. I think Checo has such an enormous load of pressure on his shoulders, not just to keep his seat, but his first race at home. People mad at his teammate. I mean, the whole thing, the Q3 issues, his qualifying as a whole, I think it got to him. And I think that was a desperate move turning in on Charles. He said, I thought he would have used his brakes by then. I thought he would have, been braking by now. Well, he was right there, man. So, I don't know. I gave it to Checo.
I mean, I just can't agree with you at all. I give it to Checo for completely different reasons. So, I got fully suckered in by the home Grand Prix FP3 pace, and not only did I think we were having a Red Bull 1-2 this week, like I predicted last week, I went and shuffled my fantasy team around so I could get Max and Checo into my team, because I was that sure Checo had proven in FP3 that he's got the pace, he's got the bit between his teeth, he's got the pace, he's going to nail this. And I don't know who it was. I don't know if it's Murray Walker, I don't know if it's every F1 commentator that's ever commentated on a race ever, but I'm pretty much sure there's a phrase that goes along the lines of, you can't win a race in the first corner, but you can definitely lose it. And that's what he did. He absolutely, a guy with all this experience, we joke that we've never driven a Formula One car in our lives or anything as close to that. These guys have, and they've done it week in, week out. When he arrives at corner 1 in his home Grand Prix, and he's on the outside of that corner, he has to assume there are multiple cars on the inside of him. So why? Why does he try to cut in so early on that one? Why doesn't he back out? Why doesn't he back out and just let those couple of cars go? Because you can't win it on the first corner, but you can lose it. And I just expected more of him. And he's the pits as well for me, Brian.
Well, let's see what Paul thought about the race.
Music?
I was on it already.
He's Mr. Perez.
So Paul sent this to us just recently. We have not had a chance to listen. Let's hear what Paul had to say.
Hey now, in the great voice of, both of you really. Well, maybe not so much Rob. Anyway, it doesn't matter. That
Yes.
was Mexico Grand Prix. Let's just be honest. Yeah, I don't know. Was it good? Was it good? Friday was okay, I guess. A lot of tyre testing, so it was even more confusing because tyre testing, you really don't really know what the other team's tyres are. You have no visibility, so you don't actually know. So you're sort of guessing what they are. So, I mean, Fridays are normally useless. I mean, this treble useless this time, so that's good. Qualifying, I would say no big shocks. I mean, we're going to say Ferrari on pole is a shock, but actually, if you look at the qualifying performance of Max in the last few weekends, I guess, unless I'm sort of being a bit, I don't know. I just think they're trying new things. I know I mentioned it last time. I'm going to stick to that. You know, I don't think they're lagging. I think they're just trying new things. So, you know, and we'll move on to the race, I guess, very quickly. I will mention Lando qualifying. The yellow flags at the end killed a lot of drivers. And I'll go to Lando in the race shortly because fair play. But the race, yeah. First lap, Perez. Oh, he was silly. I get, you know, home race. We all want him to do so well in his home race. The crowd are amazing. It's so good, and we all want to see him do well. And it's gutting when that happens, really. But you know, they take these gaps, and sometimes they're not there. And it's a racing incident. I don't think you know it was his fault, but he wasn't to blame. If that makes a ton of sense, it's just one of those scenarios. And then it was sort of like it was okay. Max come through like you expect him to, and then you know there was the usual DRS train, something which I know I spoke about before. I still hate. And that was it. Really, you just got DRS train, and it's just like you know engines versus DRS, and you just got a line of cars driving around behind each other, and it just again kills your energy. And then, I mean, I'm going to say I love K-Mag, but luckily we had a red flag. And I don't mean that negatively towards him because, you know, it's a nasty crash. It looks like there's some sort of car failing. That isn't normal for that to happen. So, sad for him. But it's sort of like, sort of perfectly at the halfway point. It screwed our race for Valtteri because we boxed a lap before. And if we'd have stayed out, then we'd have gained a whole load of track position. And then the restart... Yeah, it was okay. You know, Max drove away, and you know, good to see Lewis again coming through from where he was on Friday. That's quite good. But the reality, even with 30 laps, you've got a guy that's, you know, I think he won by 16 seconds. So 30 laps, 16 seconds. That's nearly half a second a lap that he's cutting quicker than anyone else. So that gives you some sort of indication of just how, again, on it Max is. And the booing that's happening recently with Max, it's unfair. I dislike it. You can't blame him. He's doing a job. He's doing what he's got. Fair play. Booing of Leclerc on a podium, of course that's going to happen after the... It's just pantomime. People just get too hooked up on it. But was it a good race? I sort of quite like the two races in one. Get to halfway, let's stop everyone. What position you're in? Okay, let's go again for a laugh. I enjoyed that. I thought that was good. But the reality is, and I'm going to stand by my guns on this, I really would love to see them do something about the DRS trains that happen. You know, Hulkenberg held up a load of cars. Ocon couldn't get by him. It's pure engine power versus DRS power, and you know the overtake mode in K-Mag. Excuse me. Hulkenberg defended really well. There's nothing wrong with that. That's fantastic. But it just caused the line behind, you know, and. I'll touch on Lando. For me, driver of the day. He was lagging around towards the back, and then he just got it hooked up on those tyres at the end. I think he was on mediums. And he was, for me, the performance he put in to gain the places he did, I think was really commendable. And for me, he was the standout guy. I would put a shout out to Danny Rick. I think also I'm probably being a bit harsh on him there as well, because, again, he was superb. Really drove the socks off that car, put it into a position where realistically it shouldn't be. His teammate Yuki had a typical Yuki shouty on the radio. I don't think he could have a huge amount of complaints against that one with Piastri. It was, you know, he's overtaken. He's just started moving a little bit too early, and See you later. So, an interesting race. Next week, Brazil, final one of a triple header. Brazil's always a good race. So, and it's a sprint weekend. And you can guarantee by that it's going to be awful. But actually, I'm doing helmet duty for Valtteri next week. So a little bit of a change for me. So when Valtteri is sat in the car with no helmet on, pre-race, no gloves, one shoe, half a set of overalls, you can all laugh at me on the next pod. And it will be a 3-parter again from me, my final one of the year before we head up to Las Vegas for what is going to be, let's just call it interesting and leave it there. But for now, yeah, Mexico. Oh, geez. Yeah, I guess it was okay.
It was kind of like 2 races. I agree. We actually felt the same here. But so he has helmet duty for Valtteri next week. That means
I don't even want to know what that means.
Well, I mean, he's apparently getting him, to the car with all the stuff he needs. But it'll be fascinating to see. All right, we are going long, so we're going to speed round the stats. Here we go. SAP Stats Mexican GP edition. I used that before it was popular 2 years ago, and here we go. So Verstappen today won his 16th Grand Prix of the year, which is a new single-season record. We heard that a lot on the telecast. Max has 491 points, as I've been like to do this whole season. Where does that put him in the other championships? He would still be ahead of Mercedes, who has 371 points, so he's already been the leading constructor for most of the season. However, he's now officially lapped Checo. I think he might have even done it last week. Checo has 240 points. Max is 491, so Max is now first and second in the drivers' championships, which is embarrassing. And I found this on Reddit, and I somehow cut off the person to give credit to because I was busy cropping it. With the 491 points he's amassed at the end of the GP, Max now will be the first F1 driver in history to have to pay out in excess of 1 million euros to renew his super license for 24. So we've talked about this. The drivers have to pay to keep their super license current. There's a base fee of like 10,000 euros plus 2,000 euros a point. With all of these points, the current math, according to this Redditor, is over 1 million euros for him to get in to his next season's super license. So he's doing himself a disservice at this point by continuing to pull ahead. It's costing him money.
I'm sure he's probably earning more money with each race than he needs to worry about paying out on
I'm
points.
Sure. So he
yeah.
equaled his own single-season record for the most podium finishes with 18. It was his 5th victory in Mexico City, tying the Red Bull Ring for his most successful F1 venue. The top 2 finishers have been identical in Mexico for 3 years in a row. Hamilton set the fastest lap of the race on the final lap, which the broadcast team called an extra mode that they use that they wouldn't want to use on the engine often. I'm thinking, is that what Ferrari used in quali? But okay. But with that point, he now trails Sergio by only 20 in the battle for the Drivers' Championship with 3 races to go: Brazil, Vegas, and Abu Dhabi. So that's getting spicy. It was Hamilton's 65th career fastest lap, meaning he's now only 12 behind Michael Schumacher for the all-time record. I didn't even think of fastest lap records. Sean Kelly had that one. It was his 2nd official podium, Lewis's, in the last 9 races after the DQ in Austin. Leclerc's P3 for Ferrari was his first podium finish in a standard race weekend format in 23. He's loved the sprint options, so that was his first time in a regular, and we'll see what he can do next week. Although we'll get to our predictions at some point. I got a good one for you. It was Leclerc's 100th Grand Prix start for Ferrari today. If you remember, he was with Sauber before that. And here's the downer, right? This is the wah-wah.
I knew this was coming.
You knew I was going to find this somewhere. I had to.
Yeah, I knew it.
Leclerc has not won any of his last 11 starts from pole. And here's the Sean Kelly part of it. The 2nd longest streak in history. The longest streak ain't far ahead. Rene Arnoux failed to win 13 starts from pole between 79 and 82. 13. Leclerc's at 11 of not converting pole to win. That is not a good stat, man. Carlos Sainz took P4, and he's finished 6th, 5th, and 4th in consecutive visits to Mexico. Lando Norris was 5th, as I already commented, after starting 17th. The most positions he's ever gained. The previous best was 9 in Bahrain. He was driver of the day, as we've already talked about. For the 4th consecutive race, in which a McLaren driver has won. It's the fourth race a McLaren driver's won driver of the day. That's insane. Him and Oscar have had combined 4 in a row. Obviously, Danny Rick's P7, best AlphaTauri result of the year. We knew that already. But it moves them off bottom into tie for 8th with Alfa Romeo in the Constructors' Championship. Checo's DNF for Red Bull was his second retirement in the last 4 races. Piastri took P8, the first time he's finished in the same spot in his F1 career, because he was 8th in Australia. So it's the first time he's doubled up on a finishing position.
Wow.
That's a weirdo. And then here's the last one I have that I want to highlight, and this is probably my favorite one. Esteban Ocon finished 10th to score his 10th points finish of the season. That's pretty good for Esteban to have 10 point scoring finishes already. I mean, I recognize that, what are we at, 20 races or so? 19? So maybe that's not great, but for a car that is not as fast as we thought it was, with a ton of DNFs,
and especially with other cars getting faster, like McLaren, as the year has gone on.
Yeah,
that's pretty good, yeah.
That's not too bad. All right, a real fast fantasy update. This is, they have it now where it says, these are the preliminary points. In 10th for Mexico, Stop Inventing Motorsports. Tie for 7th, Don't Be a Wet Horner. Crash Team Racing 1. Super Karate Monkey Death Car. That's a good one. In 6th, Much Mistaken. Tied for 4th, Russell My Feather and Relampico Marquinhos. In 3rd, Mansell's Mustache. In 2nd, there was this fella named Dirty Side Sap. Must be a good dude.
Finally got back.
And then in 1st, Zanetta Team 1, which for the overall championship puts in first place at this point Michael Cronje 16, FPL Instinctive, and Relampico Marquinhos in the top 3. So thanks everyone for playing. We got 3 races left. Get your teams tightened up for the last 3 races because it's all to play for. There is a t-shirt on the line.
Yes, there is. And next week we head to Brazil, which is one of my favorite races of the year. I love Spa. I love Canada. I love Silverstone. I love Brazil. Those are kind of like my 4 that I could just watch F1 like rotate around those 4 tracks probably all year. But anyway.
I got to get real quick before you hit some of the stats here in the preview. When we started this, you told me how much you love Brazil, and I liked Brazil. If you remember, I thought it was a good track and with good races, but I didn't have the same love you had for it. And I've watched with I don't know what the word is, a critical eye and an excited eye. I've paid more attention. And there have been so many good races since we've started talking about F1 at Brazil that you've converted me into an Interlagos fan. Like I went from liking it to actually looking forward to this race for a while now.
I love it. The track has got... Anyway, no, we'll get to Interlagos in a minute. So it's the Brazilian Grand Prix, which has been on the calendar since 1972. And as we always kind of hit, the name the Brazilian Grand Prix doesn't necessarily mean it's been at the same circuit all that time. So Interlagos was there from 72 to 77. 78 had a little love affair with Rio before it headed back to Interlagos for 79 and 80. 81 through 89, Rio again. Now we're just about coming into the beginning of my kind of getting into F1. So for me, 1990 to current days Interlagos, I can't really say I remember a Rio race. So I must have, I always say I was getting into F1 at the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s. So I don't remember Rio at all. So to me, Brazil is always Interlagos.
Yeah.
So it's I don't know what it is about this track. It's kind of got a little bit of everything. It's got straights. It's got, when you see it, it's got elevation changes.
Yes.
Like that first drag uphill to the first corner is fantastic. And then when you actually see the drop down, the left-hander that goes down, it looks like it almost goes off a cliff. I'm sure the drivers, when you see the onboards, they can't see. It's a blind left-hander downhill into, is that the Senna? I'm not quite sure what that first corner is there.
I know into first corner, and then you get in the second, third, and then fourth, that sweeper, which is another good place to overtake.
Absolutely. And you get kind of then the infield section where there's a mixture of kind of slower corners, little straights, and then you finally kind of come around the back end, you get some sweeping corners and sets it up for that long drag uphill to what they call as the final corner, which seems to go on forever, which is both the final corner and the final straight, which is kind of the scene of when Hamilton won his title on the last corner of the race. And despite the fact that it feels a long one, it's actually one of the shortest circuits on the Grand Prix calendar. It's 2.67 miles long, which means we get 71 laps of this bad boy. And I just absolutely love it. It's just got a little bit of everything. And we'll wait till we get to last year. So let's just kind of go down the repeat winners that we've had here down the years, as we always like to get into. And again, this is the repeat winners for the Brazilian Grand Prix, not necessarily Interlagos. So from a driver's perspective, we've had 6 wins for Alain Prost, 4 for Michael Schumacher, 3 for Carlos Reutemann, Vettel and Hamilton, 2 for Fittipaldi, Piquet, Mansell, Senna, Hakkinen, Montoya, Massa, Webber, Rosberg, Saperstein. Like, everyone's basically got 2 wins here at this track. Bizarrely, the name missing from there is Verstappen. I find that really, really odd. That I'm only listing anybody there that's got 2 or more wins, but has he even won there?
Shouldn't you have asked me to prepare the notes for this if I was?
Well, yeah, maybe. But I'm just thinking out loud now. I'm like, when I pick up the stats, it's always for repeat winners, so it's always 2 or more. So I don't know if Verstappen has actually won 1 or not, but it's not somewhere that Red Bull have really done, other than Seb and I think Webber must have won there as a Red Bull. If we look at constructors repeat winners, it's 12 for McLaren, 11 for Ferrari, 6 for Williams and Mercedes, 5 for Red Bull. So I'm imagining that's during Seb's domination years, and probably Webber grabbed his 1 win in there as well. But if it is like, let's say 3 or 4 for Seb and 1 or 2 for Webber, I don't think this is a happy hunting ground for Max. If we go to last year, this is the famous K-Mag pole that never was. This
was also, I think this is where this happened.
Wait, what are these tires? Sorry, it's a mistake.
Didn't they send Charles out on Inters at the wrong time, and he was the only car on the Inters?
Interlagos usually has a nice little weather microcosm that kind of changes pretty quickly, and we had kind of rapidly changing climate last year when K-Mag went out and got absolutely perfect conditions, nailed pole, but it was the old format of sprint, which meant that qualifying actually set the order for sprint, and then sprint set the order for the race. So K-Mag got pole for the Brazilian Grand Prix, but didn't start in pole on Sunday because George won the sprint race from Sainz and Lewis, which meant K-Mag, despite being technically pole position holder, started about, I'd have to look up there, but he was like 8th or 9th. He fell like a stone down the order during the sprint. George won the race because this was the time of year when Mercedes suddenly started looking racy again, which, by the way, they're looking racy again this year.
I know. Maybe we're going to say the same thing in a minute.
I know. So George won it from Lewis. We had a 1-2 for Mercedes and Sainz third. Red Bull did not have a happy hunting ground. And in fact, worse than that, they were struggling. Perez was trying to go for points in the championship. Max was let pass to have a bit of an attack. It didn't work out. So they told Max to give the place back to Perez. And he said no.
And Checo said,
yeah, it shows who he really is.
Exactly. So that was kind of like the beginning of the cracks appearing in this relationship. People say that it was payback for Perez causing the problem in qualifying in Monaco. Yeah, but so Red Bull haven't had a happy hunting ground here for a while, actually. In fact, I'm just going to quickly look here at the results.
So while you do that, you were right. Turn 1 and 2 are the Senna S's, or S, I guess it's and single S. My favorite part is, as you said, the infield section comes around, and turn 12 is the last turn. It's a left. It's the last, slow speed turn. 13, 14, and 15 are all top speed, but you got to get the angle right because it's effectively, by the time you're done, it's a little greater than a 90-degree turn, but it's in pieces. And so what you have to do is find the fastest way through 13, 14, and 15. And 15 is such a gentle corner. It's not even really a corner. That's where the pit lane entry is. And you kind of roll past there. And I love that. I love that section. You're basically at max power coming out of 12 until turn 1. And if you get these corners right, you can slingshot past cars even without DRS, even before DRS on the straight. It's all about getting the angles right, hitting the right apex, not scrubbing off any speed, and just getting out of 12 as fast as you can. And I love that. It's so much fun to watch. Was it 2 years ago when Lewis took a new engine here and we called it the engine overcut, where he basically had a new engine and it was the end of the year and everyone's cars were tired. And Lewis comes out here and you could hear it. It was like the Jetsons car sound as he went by every car all day. I'm so excited for this race.
No, same here. So I just double checked. So yeah, Max has one here, 2019. So you've got 2 for Webber, 2 for Vettel, and that's going back like a decade now. And then Max got one in 2019. So really, it's been slim pickings for Red Bull, other than that one Max win. So we are running along here. So we are going to have to wrap this up with predictions. So I went first with King of the Pits. So what's your predictions for Interlagos next week, Brian?
In order of the podium: P1 Lewis, P2 Max, P3 Lando.
Ooh, okay. So I'm going to agree and disagree at the same time. So I think this is a happy hunting ground for Mercedes in recent years, and they are looking racy now. So I'm going to go for Lewis to win it. I'm going to agree with you. But I'm going to go with recent last 2 years of not a happy hunting ground for Red Bull. And I'm not going to get Max podiuming.
Is he finishing, or is he just not finishing on the podium?
I don't know about that. So I'm just going to say it's Lewis from Lando from Oscar.
Oh. So you got McLaren double podium.
Yeah, but
couple
Lewis on
Brits
top
and an
step.
Aussie.
Yep.
All right. Well, Rob and I independently have both decided that Lewis is winning his first race after joining the 300 Races Club. He'd be the first person to ever do that. We look forward to seeing if he can next week in the sprint and then the overall weekend at Interlagos. Rob, anything you'd like to add before we close out?
Absolutely nothing.
Everybody, thanks for listening. We went long because there was a lot to debate from this race. I agreed a little bit with Rob, but mostly he was wrong and I was right. We appreciate you all listening. I have the last word. You can make as many faces as you like. We hope everyone has a wonderful week, and we can't wait to talk to you in a week's time. Enjoy the run-up to Interlagos.